Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC. If you're building an iOS app and want to sell digital products, whether that's coins in a game, premium features in a productivity app, or a subscription to your service, you'll probably want to use Apple's system for in-app purchases. That system is called StoreKit 2, Apple's native framework for handling purchases, subscriptions, and entitlements inside your app. StoreKit 2 gives you all the tools to present products, process payment securely through the App Store, and check what the user owns. But it can also get pretty technical since you're responsible for things like entitlement management and receipt validation. So I have a quick demo app that we'll be slightly recreating here today where we can trigger an in-app purchase to unlock a sample feature. And we can see here while we're testing locally, for testing purchases only, I'm not spending 99 cents. Once that purchase has been validated, our view can update. We know that we've purchased it and even displays on our home. And we're also going to be exploring subscriptions as well. Again, this is just a sample feature. And once we purchase the one-time charge of the monthly sub, we're able to validate both of those experiences and even restore purchases. So some people choose to use third-party services like RevenueCat. I've also made a video on that. But at its core, StoreKit 2 is the foundation. In this video, we'll dive into how StoreKit 2 works, what it can do for your app, and why it's important to understand even if you plan to use a service like RevenueCat later on. If you do want this sample app, I'll be posting in the description below with lovely comments thanks to Xcode 26's AI coding assistant. So tons of comments in this one. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive on into how you can create your own in-app purchase / subscriptions. So I'm going to be starting off in a blank Xcode project, but always feel free to add this to an existing project, especially with in-app purchases, usually something a little bit more down the line. So I'm going to call this one StoreKit Demo. If you do want to grab the demo that I was showcasing in the intro, the link to that is in the description below. Okay, we're going to be using SwiftUI, language of Swift, and we have to take care of some tasks before we end up coding our store. So the first thing that I recommend doing is clicking on your app target at the very top left. Under signing and capabilities, you'll see the plus sign for capabilities up here. I would look for I believe it's -app, yes, in-app purchases, and you can just double click on that. And you'll see it'll load for a second. I have my automatic signing turned on through Xcode, so this will actually make sure that we can access this app on Appstore Connect. Now this next step is completely optional. It's just a good habit to get into, especially if you do have a developer account. We can head on over to Appstore Connect. If you don't have a developer account and you're only interested in testing locally, you can skip ahead to when we're adding them to the StoreKit config file. So you want to head on over to Appstore Connect. Make sure you log on in. Under the Apps tab, you can create a new app. If you already have your app set up in Appstore Connect, you should be good to go. I'm going to call this one StoreKit Demo. For the bundle ID, I've just selected that StoreKit Demo. That's why I enabled in-app purchases with my automatic signing. This allows it to basically say, hey, I want to manage this app on Appstore Connect. Make sure it has that connection. And the SKU, you can just set as whatever. Once your project has been created, on the left side, you'll want to scroll down on this kind of left tab here. Oh, I'm still stuck in that screen. On the left tab, you'll want to go to the in-app purchases. Now you can actually create your in-app purchases here and then sync them to a local file in order to test. So to create an in-app purchase, we'll go ahead and create. We have a few types. So in-app purchases are separate from subscriptions. If you do want to create a subscription, you'll want to go to the subscription tab as well. For our in-app purchase, we can create a consumable or non-consumable. I'm going to do non-consumable. Consumable, you can think of this like things that are going to be used in the case of, V-Bucks on Fortnite, where you can kind of add this virtual currency and then spend it later. It could be extra lives in a game. Non-consumable is something you unlock and you have permanently. So think of things like on Procreate, you might purchase a new brush. You might just also be able to unlock a skin and use it forever through one direct purchase. I'm going to do non-consumable. Again, a consumable, you're kind of like, you're consuming it. It's going away. Okay, we want to create a reference name. Now this is something that we'll be seeing on the surface. So I'll just call this premium. And then for the product ID, this is where we're going to be referencing what it is in the code. You can think of it like a behind the scenes code. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call mine sample feature. Okay, so before it is ready to be tested on Sandbox, we do have to make sure that it has all the metadata that it does need. If you have a missing metadata, you probably won't be able to test it on Sandbox. You will be able to test it locally, however. When it's in the ready for review, pending for review, or once it's been approved, you can test it on Sandbox. So we need to set up the availability. We can choose where we want it to be. You can be like, oh, I don't want people in Luxembourg. Sorry, people in Luxembourg, you can't purchase this. You can really customize where you'd like to have people be able to purchase your items. You can add a pricing schedule. So you can choose a price. So if we wanted this to be 99 cents, we'll then be able to see all the prices for all the regions that it's available in, and we can even customize these individually. Otherwise, it's pretty good at, because there's those templated prices, adjusting for those regions. And then for the localization, you do need at least one, we can call it premium, and short description of what it unlocks or does. You don't have too many characters on that description, so keep it super duper brief. If you do need to edit the tax category, make sure you take care of that. And you will also need to include a screenshot for review. Again, this is just purely a review screenshot. You'll also want to include review notes. I would include what this project does and what it unlocks. So again, if it's like the brushes, give a short description of that, as well as a very clear step-by-step where this can be found in your app. When they review your app to be launched or this update to come through, they need to be able to find all those different features. So tell them what it does, where to access it. Once it's unlocked, tell them the benefits, or like say you have a store screen, be like, okay, now go back to the main game and test it out. And for the picture, I would upload where it is in your app. So what we'll do is back in our Xcode project, we're going to create a new file from templates. I'm going to right click in our project here, new file from template, and you can either scroll down to other or use the filter and do a StoreKit configuration file. We're going to press next and we can give it a name. I'm just going to call this one demo store. And now the reason we set up things on Appstore Connect is sync this file with an app in Appstore Connect. We can check that. It should probably automatically detect which one you're using. And we're going to go ahead and create. Now, because it's synced, if we do add more in-app purchases or even subscriptions, you will be able to see those reflected here. We can see here's the premium one that we had made. Amazing. For those of you who are not using Appstore Connect and you want to create a local StoreKit configuration file, right click on your project settings, new file from template, search for the StoreKit configuration file under other. We'll call this one store2. Make sure that the sync is not checked. Hit next, add it to your project. You'll then want to press the plus button in the bottom left, and you can add a consumable in-app purchase, so things like V-Bucks, a non-consumable in-app purchase, so like a brush that you wouldn't be losing, something you unlock permanently. Then you have the non-renewing and auto-renewing subscription. For the non-renewing subscription, this would be something like a season pass for a basketball team. You have it for 90 days and it doesn't automatically renew. Auto-renewing, this is something like an Apple Music subscription. So as long as you have it and it'll automatically renew, you can access those music libraries. Just like with Appstore Connect, you're going to want to add a reference name and a product ID. And you'll be referencing the product ID in code. You can adjust the different properties here. Now, one thing I don't like is you can't actually add and test new in-app purchases like you can when it's not synced to Appstore Connect. So I can't add a subscription. So we're gonna head on back over to Appstore Connect and we're gonna create a subscription. So with subscriptions, if you're doing an auto-renewable subscription, you need to create a subscription group. Now, keep in mind they can only subscribe to one group at a time. So if you have something like a 12-month subscription, you can have that be very discounted and then offer a 6-month, a 3-month, and a 1-month as well. If you want to do a non-renewing subscription, you don't need to set these up within a group. You can press manage down here and it'll take you to the non-renewing subscriptions. And you can create it just as usual. Let's call this one monthly. We'll give it a product ID. And just like with before, you'll need to include the availability, price scheduling, localization, an image, as well as that review information. Like in Appstore Connect, we can see that it's synced and we can see our monthly non-renewing subscription. One more thing before we get into coding. If you are going to be testing this locally, you will need to include this StoreKit configuration file in runtime. So under product, go to the scheme and then edit scheme. Once you're in the edit scheme, you'll see that we have options. So run options and then a StoreKit configuration file. And you can choose to add your store here. If you have multiple stores that you're testing out, you can choose which one you want to use. Once you've done that, you can press the close button. This will allow for local testing. If you want to test on Sandbox, you'll need to go to the settings on the device you're using, go to the developer tab at the very bottom, then scroll pretty much all the way to the bottom where there's a Sandbox account sign in, and you can sign into the Sandbox account there. Again, your in-app purchases need to be in the waiting for review stage or ready to submit stage for you to test them on Sandbox. I'd also recommend testing your app on TestFlight with Sandbox as well. When Apple is approving your in-app purchases, they do test on the Sandbox environment. So just because you know they work locally with the StoreKit configuration file doesn't necessarily mean they'll work on Sandbox. There might be some bugs or some quirks you need to test out. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to the main meat and potatoes of our application. So we're going to create a content view here that's going to be for an in-app purchase, and then we'll be creating a subscribe view for a subscription. We're going to start off by taking care of importing, and the most important import we have to do is for StoreKit. Now we do use StoreKit too, but we just import StoreKit normally. We'll also be importing combine, and we won't need it for this one as I don't believe we're dealing with a date, but for the subscription, you'll definitely want to also include importing a foundation. StoreKit is for the products and transactions, SwiftUI for our interface, and combine and foundation for the async state and date checks. And we'll also be using an observable object. So we're not going to be touching our UI for a while. In the end, we'll probably have this hooked up to be a button. Instead, we're going to actually be creating our class for our store view model. Now we're going to start off with a @main actor, and this is going to allow it to guarantee that any UI updates happen safely on the main thread of the device. We'll then create a final class, which is the store view model. This is going to conform to an observable object. If you're getting an error, make sure that you have combine imported. The observable object just works with SwiftUI in order to refresh the views. Okay, we're going to then hard code our product ID. So we'll do a private let, and we'll create a product identifier. Now, what I would suggest doing, and this is a string by the way, is going to your demo store, whatever your StoreKit is called. Under your in-app purchase, I would copy and paste this product ID just so there's no weird funky errors, no spelling mistakes. I'm Mr. Spelling Mistakes, so I'm always just like copy and paste where you can. I've made my fair share of mistakes. Alrighty, let's create two published variables now, and we're going to have one for the product, which is going to conform to the product, and this is going to be optional. This is something with StoreKit. And we're using published here because it automatically updates the UI when a product loads or a purchase state actually changes. So let's create another variable for is purchased. Now this is pretty lightweight for what we're doing for the store. If you want to see a more in-depth one, in the description below, I do have this sample project that has a little bit more logic. I just want to cover the basics today. Okay, let's go ahead and then create our initializer. We're going to include a couple functions in here that we haven't created yet, but we want to have the initializer. So whenever the store is created, we load the product, we check the entitlement, and start listening for any transaction updates like immediately. So we're going to actually have a task here, and we're going to have two awaits. So we're going to be referencing a function called load product. Again, we'll be creating in a moment, and another one, update purchase status. This is really important that we're initializing with that. We'll get some errors, totally fine. We're going to head on out of the initializer, and let's take care of that function. I guess it's a method because it's in a class to load the product. Let's go ahead and create that. Now for these methods, we're going to be using the async keyword for, I think, pretty much all of them. So we're going to use this opportunity to ask StoreKit to resolve our product ID into a product object. So this way product can contain the localized name, description, and price we want to show the user. We never hard code these, and I'll show you. So if we have, the price of 99 cents USD, we flip over to euros or Moroccan dollars, right? It'll actually update and show the user in their local currency. Okay, so we're going to do if let the loaded. We're going to go ahead and try a wait, and then we're going to look at the product with a capital P. This is the information about the product that we configure within Appstore Connect or in that local StoreKit Connect file. We'll then look at the products here, and we'll use the for, and we're going to include a collection. So we're going to use the square brackets, and we're going to be looking at that product identifier. Again, that's something we've created above here. We're then going to be looking at the first object. We'll add a brace, and then we'll look at our product, and that'll equal loaded. So we know that we've loaded up that product. Okay, now let's handle the purchasing. So we'll create another method, and let's call this one purchase. Again, async. From here, we want to start the purchase flow for the product, verify the resulting transaction, and finish it and update any entitlements. Now we're going to start off with a guard let, and we're going to look at the product. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and return. The reason we're doing this is we are ensuring that we don't try buying before a product loads, right? That wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. We're then going to create some cases. So if the case is success, we'll have our result, and that would equal the try a wait. We're going to look at the product dot purchase. We'll then add a comma, and we'll look at another case. The other case we're going to be looking at is verified. We'll then look at the transaction, and that transaction is going to be based off of the result. In this result here, we can look at two more awaits, which is the transaction.finish. So this is indicating to the App Store that the app delivered the product, purchased content, or enabled it to be finished. And then we're going to await one more time, and we're going to update the purchase status, which is a function we still have to create, but we'll get there. So updating the status makes our UI actually flip instantly, and you'll see it in our demo. Okay, and because it's causing errors because it doesn't exist, let's go ahead and now do our entitlement check, which is going to be that update purchase status. So create another method. Also going to be async. It's like, finally, you referenced this so many times, now let's create it. Okay, so with entitlement check, we want to check the latest transaction for our product. If verified and not revoked, we can actually mark it as purchased. So we're going to do another if let result, and that's going to equal the await. And this is where the transaction keyword comes in. This is information that represents the customers, so the person purchasing the product in our app. This is also going to be great because this actually allows us to handle receipts at the most basic level. So we're going to do another product for, and we're going to be looking at the product identifier. This one doesn't have to be a collection at all. We're going to add a comma. We're going to look at our cases. Once again, we'll be using the verified. And we're going to look at the transaction, and it's also going to equal the result. This time we're going to look at our variable of is purchased, and that's going to equal, and we'll put it in brackets, the transaction. Then we're going to be looking at the, I'm really bad at pronouncing this, the revocation date. So this one here, this is the date that the App Store refunded the transaction or revoked it from family sharing. So we want to make sure that this equals nil. So we're going to use the double equal sign and then close the bracket. So if it hasn't been refunded, if it hasn't been denied from family sharing, you're good to go. We'll then add our else statement. Is purchased, we're going to be setting the flag for that to be false. So this ensures we honor refunds or revocations. It also keeps the purchase state accurate between different app launches. It's also funny, we just have the content view on the right side here, hello world, and we're just like coding all this really cool StoreKit configuration. All right, we're almost done with the, I guess I'll call it boilerplate code here, and we're going to create a transaction listener. So this is going to be a background task that listens for new or updated transactions while the app is running. So this one's actually going to be a private function. We'll call it listen for transaction. And this one's actually not async. It will, however, be a task, and we'll have a for await update in. We're going to look at the transaction.updates. So this is an asynchronous sequence. That's why we're using task and await that emits a transaction when the system creates or updates transactions that have occurred. Still within this brace, we're going to add another opening brace, and we're going to look for the case of verified. We'll look at a transaction again. And this is going to equal the update. I'm going to add a comma, and we'll look at our transaction.product ID. And this is going to double equals the product identifier. We'll add another brace, and from here we'll add two await functions. The first one's going to be the transaction.finish, as well as the update purchase status. Okay, we should be pretty much good to go. Essentially, this transaction listener all the way down here handles the out-of-band changes, family sharing, restores, refunds, has the same rules, verify, finish, and then update status, and it prevents the UI from going stale, which is great. In our actual content view, let's go ahead and hook this up to a button, and then we'll just display whether or not something's purchased. In your app, when you're handling the actual functionality of when it's purchased, you can use state variables, Boolean value is purchased, true or false, and handle your logic appropriately. I'm going to get rid of all of our placeholders here. We can say goodbye to the hello world on the right side. Alright, let's create a state object under the content view, and this is going to be a private var of store. Now this is going to equal what we just created, the store view model. This is going to create the app's root view and initialize the store. So this is going to ensure that the store instance survives the view redraws. Critical because it manages your transaction listener and purchase states. All right, just within this VStack, I'm going to have some text here, and we're going to use the store.isPurchased in order to determine whether or not they have the feature unlocked, or we're going to use that ternary operator here, whether it is locked. So if they have it, it'll display text that says feature unlocked. Otherwise, it'll say locked. I'm also going to just add some title font here. There we go. Next, I want to have some logic where if the product is loaded, show a purchase button. Otherwise, we'll display some text that just says it's loading. So we'll hit if let product equals store.product. So if it has successfully loaded what it is, we'll create a button. Now we're going to have a task button for this because we are going to be using a wait, and we're going to be looking at the store.purchase. Now it's going to get mad at us because we don't have a label for our button quite yet. So let's go ahead and create that. And we'll use our store.isPurchased once again in order to display, okay, we've already got this. We can say purchased, our ternary operator. Otherwise, we can suggest that they buy it. And this is the real cool part. We can use string interpolation in order to look at the product.displayPrice, right? You can also use the display name if you want, but you know, I'd probably hard code that one unless you do have localization. But yeah, we can look at the product display price so they can see, oh, it's 99 cents. We're gonna add a frame to this. At the end of our if let, we'll then have an else. So when it hasn't been loaded, we can just say loading or loading product. All right, let's also add a button style. My favorite, bordered prominent. And I'm also going to have it be disabled when the store item has been purchased. So store.isPurchased. Now within the preview, I really don't find that this works the best when we do press the buy here. It's typically not going to work very great. So I would suggest either using a real device or using the simulator. So I'm going to go ahead and boot it on up. All right, here we go. We can see that it's locked. I'm going to press the buy button. We can see that we get this little pop-up, Xcode. Don't worry, for testing purposes only, you will not be charged for this. There is also a placeholder here if you have an app icon. Go ahead and purchase it. Done, the little ba-ding, we're all set. Now when we hit OK, it's going to refresh and that feature is unlocked. If I were to completely restart this app, it'll remember that our feature is unlocked and we can't purchase it anymore. This is usually tied to an Apple ID. When you're working on the simulator, you might not have one signed in, so there might be a couple quirks there. Now, really quick, I want to talk about the settings. So if you go to the settings, and this can be on a real phone or simulator, go to the developer tab, scroll all the way down nearly to the bottom. I think it used to be at the bottom. There's the Sandbox Apple account. This is where you can sign into the Apple account to test not locally. So if your in-app purchases are ready to go on the App Store Connect, this is where you can sign in. You will want to not run your scheme with the local store in order to test that though. So make sure you've removed that before you do that. Again, all this is doing is creating a fake store instead of talking to Apple servers. If you don't want it anymore, go to the product, scheme, edit scheme, and then you would be removing it here. If you want to create a Sandbox account to test on, go back to App Store Connect, users and access, and there's Sandbox, and you can create your account. I just have a few of them here, and you can even update the region or see when they've last purchased. Once that's been created, sign in onto the device, remove that App Store local config file from runtime, test it, and you should be good to go. Okay, and that's great. Let's go ahead and quickly do the subscription. Now we will actually be able to copy a lot of our boilerplate code on over, and I'll probably do that just to save a little bit of time. So we're going to create a new SwiftUI view. And let's call this one sub view. We'll start off with our imports. Again, StoreKit. Make sure that this one you definitely have foundation, and also combine. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and copy our final class here, and we'll just refactor the code a little bit to match for the subscriptions. I'm going to go ahead and paste it. Now, we definitely can't have store view model again, so I'm going to call this one sub view model. When you are renaming these variables, I really highly recommend that you're doing so with the refactor tool to make sure it's changing everything. So even for this product identifier, refactor, rename, and let's call this one sub product identifier, right? And you can see it's highlighted here with all the ones it's going to rename. For the is purchased, let's go ahead and change this to is subscribed. Which if you're not subscribed, you should do so. I don't know how, I'm really bad at doing those kind of segues. It always feels so weird, you know? Let's also refactor our purchase status. And let's call this one sub status. Okay, and we should be pretty much good to go. The big change here is going to be actually in that update sub status here. So where we have our case of verifying and we have the result, let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. So instead of having our is subscribe equal that, we're going to check whether it's active. So we'll create another constant and we'll call it let active. And this is going to equal the, we'll put it in a bracket here, the transaction dot revocation date. Once again, we're going to make sure it's not nil. Then we're going to use our double ampersand to then look at the transaction dot expiration date. And we're going to actually use a map of this. From here, we can include some basic logic. So we'll do the $0, make sure that's greater than the date. We can then apply a fallback to be true. We'll then look at the is subscribed, and we'll set that to be based on the activity. The expiration date and revocation date let us cover refunds, cancellations, and expirations correctly. Otherwise, with just those few changes, which was basically renaming and handling the subscription expiration date, we're pretty much good to go. And we're going to create a pretty similar UI to just make sure that we're subscribed. And then if we are subscribed, we can handle the logic however we want. I would create another state object here, and we'll create a private var. And this will be a model. And this is going to equal our subscription view model. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a VStack here, and we'll have some text. This one's going to be based off the model is subscribed. Another good reason to have those things be named appropriately. We'll say subbed, and then not subbed. I'm getting a little lazy with this one, but you can kind of see how all these things can work in tandem. We'll do our if let again. So if our product equals the model.product, we'll have our button. Once again, it'll be task, and we'll do an await model.purchase. We'll have our label so it doesn't get mad at us. And this will be based off of the model.isSubscribed. So if we are subbed, we can just say subbed. You'd actually want something different here. So make like maybe already purchased, right? And we can use our product.displayPrice again, so they know how much they can subscribe for. I'm also going to disable this based off of the model is subscribed. I'm just going to change this to instead be the sub view, and then let's go ahead and see our subscription in action. Again, very similar to setting up the in-app purchase. We just need to make sure that we're handling the kind of expiration date a little bit differently. And make sure that you've updated the product identifier for the subscription, because I didn't, and I was like, what's going on here? Remember, copying and pasting is your friend, but even I managed to mess up copy and pasting. Okay, so make sure the subscription product identifier is the one in your Appstore Connect or config file. There we go. Not subbed, we can subscribe for 99 cents. Again, we're gonna get this little pop-up for testing purposes only. Wonderful. Now you're all set. Now we're booting into these views directly. And that's great if you're, just purchasing something, it updates the view and you have access to that new kind of page, right? What if we want to check if something's purchased on a totally different screen? Okay, I just created a really quick basic home view. So make sure that you're importing SwiftUI and StoreKit as always. Then I would create your product IDs. So declare the product identifiers that you're using for the in-app purchase and the subscriptions. Hard coding them here keeps it pretty simple. In actual production, you'd probably centralize the IDs to avoid any typos or duplications. Then I would create some state variables to track the entitlement statuses for each product. So we have the in-app purchase and the subscription here. I then just have a navigation stack that will display whether they're purchased or not and actually take us to those different spots. At the end of the stack, I then have the task to await. This is actually going to run entitlement checks whenever the view appears. So we're going to make sure that the UI is going to show the correct state on launch without the required user interaction. So if you have a certain, character that needs to be unlocked, whenever the view appears, you can check against these entitlements. For the functions themselves, let's look at the checking of the in-app purchase here. We fetch the latest transaction for the in-app purchase, we verify it cryptographically, and we mark it as purchased only if it hasn't been revoked and wasn't upgraded. There are upgradable products, by the way. This ensures that the app honors refunds, revocations, or upgrades, so users don't get access where they shouldn't. For the subscription model, very, very similar. It gets the latest transaction for the subscription and marks active only if not revoked, and the expiration date is in the future. So subscriptions have some time limits, so expiration checks are critical. This makes sure that the user only sees the sub purchased, or whatever the actual logic would be, if the sub is currently valid. And we can see here our features indeed unlocked, and we're also subbed. If you do want to, if you're just testing on the simulator like me, if you do want to reinstall it, you totally can. Just going to delete the app from the simulator here and then boot it again. And then we can see now that we've reset it again, we don't have a restore function and we're not tied to an Apple ID currently, but we were able to, for testing purposes, delete the app and see that it's now checking and saying, hey, they're no longer purchased. So if you enjoyed today's video, please go ahead and give me a like, subscribe. Let me know what you're adding to your apps for in-app purchases. This is a very basic overview. So I'll include this demo, I'll probably call it like simple demo, and the more advanced demo from the intro that has a little bit more code. I didn't want to cover all that extra code because we'd probably be here for a long time. That one also comes with comments, thanks to the new Xcode coding assistant, which is really great for creating those comments. So if you are looking to add a little bit more in-depth feature and functionality, you might want to check out that second demo once you've mastered the basic. Otherwise, good luck in getting the in-app purchases set up in your application on SwiftUI and Xcode. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.